And welcome to Hannity. So last night it took, the legacy media mob about, 30 seconds to try and, Jimmy Kimmel, James Comey, turn him into a martyr, a victim? Well, that means, to turn Comey into a martyr, but do not be fooled. The left, the media mob, they have peddled their lies, their conspiracy theories for years. They have done breathlessly, 24/7, every second, minute, hour of every day. They even got awards for their horrible work. They should return them. They never will. But here's the truth tonight. James Comey, the former FBI director, is not the victim of a weaponized Department of Justice. Here's the fact. The biggest victim of government weaponization, corruption, abuse of power in American history is a man by the name of Donald J. Trump. He has been the target of a long-running deep state conspiracy at the local level, state level, federal level. Nobody on the left ever condemned any of this. They were just willing to sit quietly by because they didn't like him. Oh, because you don't like somebody, you'll weaponize the Department of Justice, the FBI, or intel community. But they were willing to accept a lot of government weaponization as long as Donald Trump was the victim. Now, we did ask FBI Director Kash Patel about this very conspiracy. He calls it the grand conspiracy on this show last month. Take a look. But there's been a lot of talk and a lot written about the investigation into a grand conspiracy. To the extent possible, what can you tell us about that? In other words, that this is long-standing. If it is, in fact, a grand conspiracy, the statute of limitations would be eliminated. Is that what the investigation is about?
Well, Sean, what we're doing is building a case for the American public under the Truth and Transparency and Accountability Initiative. And what I mean by that is AG Bondi brilliantly highlighted our partners, Director Ratcliffe at the CIA and Director Gabbard over at the DNI. We are working with them because the documents that would facilitate an investigation of this magnitude don't just rest at the FBI and DOJ. They're throughout the intelligence community.
Now, tonight, we're going to give you the definitive point-by-point rundown of how this conspiracy, or as Kash calls it, grand conspiracy against President Trump, has been unfolding over the past decade, from the moment he and Melania Trump came down that escalator at Trump Tower. Remember a guy by the name of Mark Elias? Remember him? His name always comes up during election years. Well, at the time, he worked for a law firm called Perkins Coie. We talked a lot about it, which, by the way, worked for both the DNC and the Clinton campaign back in 2016. In April of that year, Elias hired that research firm. Remember, we talked a lot about it, Fusion GPS, and they assembled op research on Donald Trump. Fusion GPS then hires a guy, a British firm, to help, and that resulted in the hiring of a former MI6 agent, his name, Christopher Steele. We talked a lot about him. Steele assembled a series of documents that later put together we'll call the dossier, filled with salacious, completely, totally, now proven, debunked, and false information about Donald Trump. And this bought and paid for Russian disinformation dossier was all paid for by the Clinton campaign. Remember in July of 2016, then FBI agent Peter Strzok, remember him? The guy who told his lover in a text message that they would stop Trump from becoming president, and that they had an insurance policy. Now, that they had opened a counterintelligence investigation into the Trump campaign on the basis of a rumor. Bar talk, as Senator Lindsey Graham said on our show last night. He will join us and explain in more detail. And then on July 5th, 2016, James Comey let Hillary Clinton walk. Remember that infamous press conference, no reasonable prosecutor would prosecute? He admitted to the world that she mishandled top secret classified information. No reasonable prosecutor would do that unless you're raiding Mar-a-Lago. And then in September 2016, according again to Senator Graham, the FBI was warned by the intelligence community as early as August of that year that the Clinton campaign planned to manufacture a Trump-Russia scandal to distract from the Clinton email case, if you recall, which was big news at the time. Comey says he never remembers any of that ever happening. Lindsey Graham calls that claim stunning. The night I interviewed him, I said, I don't believe him. Lindsey said, neither do I. And I told Lindsey that night that exact thing. And by the way, it's sure hard to believe him because by October 2016, James Comey's FBI, they were using Hillary Clinton's debunked false Russian disinformation dossier. Just to remind you, the one that claimed that Donald Trump was in the Ritz-Carlton with hookers that were urinating on him. Completely false. It was a lie from the beginning. But it became the basis of not one, but 4 FISA applications, 3 of which were signed by James Comey to allow them to ruin the life of one Carter Page and spy on American citizens, but also giving a backdoor to not only the Trump campaign, but after he won his transition team and then into his first presidency in 2017. Comey and his friends now say the dossier, yeah, it wasn't enough to warrant FISA surveillance. I'm going to play that tape in a minute. Donald Trump was elected the 45th president of the United States. That was November 8, 2016. Now, we have new information. Thanks to Tulsi Gabbard and her recent declassification, we now know that on December 7, 2016, then DNI Director James Clapper was told the intel community assessed, we're talking about career, rank and file, senior intelligence officials, the people that do the hard work, that Russia had not impacted the outcome of the election. Well, then according to this classified information, President Obama did not like that assessment. According to Gabbard, she said it on this show about this story. He wasn't happy, so he wanted another intelligence assessment. She told us what happened next. Take a look.
The December 9th meeting, we declassified and released what they called the summary of conclusions from that meeting. Then DNI James Clapper took the lead on what President Obama wanted done, and which was essentially create a document that tells us not if, but how Russia interfered with the election. President Obama delivered the conclusion that he wanted the intelligence community to reach and directed them to find and essentially create and manufacture the intelligence to support the conclusion that President Obama wanted to deliver to the American people. Once that document was drafted, the deep state kicked into gear and did what they usually do. They started leaking this classified information out to their friends at the Washington Post and others who are working hand in glove with the deep state.
So understand what Tulsi's saying there. Originally, the dossier was designed to defeat Donald Trump. Well, then the intel community had an assessment. Wasn't liked by the likes of Obama, so he orders a new assessment with a predetermined outcome. Then the dossier is used not only for FISA warrants, but to also sabotage an incoming president. As a matter of fact, 10 days before Donald Trump was sworn into office on January 10, 2017, BuzzFeed, they published the Steele dossier. Democrats, the legacy media mob, started pushing the narrative that Russia helped Donald Trump win using Hillary Clinton's bought and paid for dirty Russian dossier. The left, liberals, all the legacy media mob, all willing to accept what turned out to be very early on debunked lies as a fact. The left didn't care. They still don't care. They wanted to believe the absolute worst because they hated. They didn't think Donald Trump would win. They hated the fact that he won. The FBI investigation continued even after Donald Trump took office, even after they knew the dossier, the basis for all this was garbage because they had pushed out Steele by that point. When Donald Trump fired Comey for being bad at his job, the deep state, they freaked out. May 17th, you might recall, 2017, Rod Rosenstein, he appointed Robert Mueller as a special counsel to investigate the, quote, Trump-Russia collusion. That never happened. And we all knew that there was no Trump-Russia collusion. Mueller brought no charges. Trump defeated the Russia hoax. It took 3 years, but they had set the trap. And the deep state attacks on him unrelenting. And then in the fall, if you look at the grand conspiracy that Kash Patel is talking about, okay, it wasn't just 2016. Because they wanted to use fake information to stop Trump. Then they wanted to sabotage him when he became president. In the fall of 2020. Move to the next election. All right, Russia's behind us. Impeachment 1 is behind us. The FBI put cinder blocks on the scales of that election. Remember the Hunter Biden laptop scandal? Well, we now know that the FBI verified the authenticity of Hunter's laptop in March of 2020. But guess what? They didn't tell anybody. But they did meet weekly with big tech and social media companies all summer long, warning them to be on the lookout for some type of Russian-generated misinformation. The negative stories may be about Hunter. It may be about Joe Biden. Remember 51 former intelligence officials that never, ever, ever saw the laptop. They signed that letter, falsely claiming the laptop story was Russian disinformation. The FBI did nothing to correct the record. They were pre-bunking it with big tech. Now, remember one other point. The FBI also knew that that story was going to break, because they knew Bob Costello, great attorney, who was then Rudy Giuliani's attorney, had a copy of it. They knew the likelihood of that being made public was very, very high. Anyway, Trump faced the same left-wing tactics. Liberals were willing to accept all of this. On August 8th, 2022, Mar-a-Lago was raided. Now we're heading into a third presidential election. More cinder blocks. They didn't treat Hillary Clinton this way. They didn't treat Joe Biden this way. No, they turned Mar-a-Lago upside down. Even Trump had given them open access to Mar-a-Lago, going through Melania's closet, Barron's closet, all in the name of a false prosecution that completely ignored Donald Trump's protections under the Presidential Records Act, something that neither Hillary nor Joe Biden had with their top secret classified information. Trump was cooperating. He gave him access to the entire property, all 22 acres of it, not 18 million, closer to $1.5 billion. And even after moving out of New York City, talking about Donald Trump in this particular case, even after moving out, you know, Trump wasn't safe in Florida on September 21st, 2022. Remember, New York Attorney General Tish James, the one that said she's going after one man, Donald Trump, one family, the Trump family, one business, the Trump organization, after publicly promising to sue him and running on a platform of doing so, she tried to destroy his business, destroy him, as promised, and get the whole thing shut down. They lied and said Mar-a-Lago was worth $18 million. Think about this. No Democrats said, wait a minute, that's not true. That's not accurate. You go to Realtor.com, Zillow.com, you can look up the valuation of a property like that in Palm Beach, Florida. I'm telling you, as a resident of Florida, it's closer to over $1 billion. By the way, I would have bought it at that price. I would have found the money some way. It is worth that much. And by the way, that judgment has since been vacated. Another hoax. Manhattan DA attorney Alvin Bragg, remember? He ran on the promise also to get Trump. March 30th, 2023. He kept his promise by creating a new crime so he could be the first prosecutor to charge a former president with a felony. And he turned an expired misdemeanor. In other words, the statute of limitations had run out. It's a misdemeanor to have a non-disclosure agreement, even if you're accusing him of it. Turns out perfectly legal, happens in business every day. He was labeled a legal expense and paid as a legal expense. And on August 1st, 2023, Biden's weaponized DOJ, they indicted Trump for contesting the results of the 2020 election. That case has since been dismissed. 2 weeks later, Fulton County, Georgia, DA, remember Fani Willis, also indicted Trump for contesting the results of the 2020 election. You know, things that Stacey Abrams and Hillary Clinton have done. And remember, she put her boyfriend in charge of that prosecution. She was later removed from the case, which, again, has since fallen apart. Anyone on the left say anything about any of these false prosecutions? Nope. They celebrate it. They care about the double standard? Nope. They care about the FISA warrants being based on a bought and paid for Russian disinformation dossier? Nope. They didn't care about any double standard. The entire justice system, the entire deep state, the entire legacy media mob, all weaponized against one man, one family, one organization, and it was designed to destroy him. The left has been so radicalized by their Trump derangement syndrome They know the media will go along with their lies, peddled conspiracies, and they will resort to anything to get Donald Trump. They can't beat him in the arena of ideas. This is where the corruption lies. And that's the topic of our discussion here. Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to Fox News YouTube page and catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You will not get it anywhere else.